Welcome to the Limitless Leaders podcast series brought to you by ASPS, the Aesthetic Society, and the American Hernia Society with the generous support of Allergan Aesthetics. My name is Dr. Ashley Amalfi, and I'm a board-certified plastic surgeon at the Quatella Center for Plastic Surgery in Rochester, New York, and I'm the chair of the ASPS Women Plastic Surgeons Forum and the Limitless Leaders Steering Committee member. Please join us for the Limitless Leaders podcast, where we dive into the stories of extraordinary women making a significant impact in our field, as well as the men who are supporting them to get there. We are breaking gender barriers and inspiring the next generation of leaders.
You're listening to the Limitless Leaders podcast series brought to you by the American Society for Plastic Surgery, the Aesthetic Society, and the American Hernia Society with the generous support of Allergan Aesthetics. I'm Dr. Donna Tepper, today's special guest host of Limitless Leaders. I'm a plastic and reconstructive surgeon in Detroit, Michigan. I work at Henry Ford Hospital and have been the division head for 2 years. On today's episode, we have 3 very influential and accomplished women, and I'm privileged to spend the next 45 minutes probing into their stories of product development and industry partnerships. To begin, we have Dr. Peled, who is a successful plastic surgeon in private practice in San Francisco, California. We have Dr. Aldona Spiegel, a plastic and reconstructive surgeon, professor of clinical surgery at Weill Cornell School of Medicine and Texas A&M. She is the director for the Center of Breast Restoration and chief of the Division of Innovation in the Department of Surgery at Houston Methodist Hospital. And finally, we have Carrie Strom, Senior Vice President of AbbVie and the President of Global Allergan Aesthetics. Welcome. It's great to have you all. To begin and to give a roadmap to our listeners for the next few minutes, I'd like to start with Dr. Spiegel and Dr. Peled. If you can tell us a little bit more about yourselves, what is your practice like, how long you've been working, and your link to product development. And then Carrie, as Vice President of AbbVie and President of Global Allergan Aesthetics. If you could also tell us a little bit about yourself and your successful journey from Pfizer to Allergan and your ascent to the Vice President of AbbVie, as well as your link to industry partnerships. So Carrie, if you would want to start us off.
Oh, sure. I'd be happy to. And thank you so much for including me on this important discussion with this very esteemed group of leaders. As you said, I started my career at Pfizer, 23 years ago. And I started in a sales role. And I think that was a great foundation for people in industry because you're close to the customer. And there's nothing better than understanding what customers need. That's important in all phases of whatever role you are in industry, and especially when it comes to the topic of this discussion, which is product development, and how do you eventually develop products that your customers and your consumers need. I was in Pfizer for about 11 years in roles in sales and marketing, most of my time spent on Lipitor, which at the time was the biggest revenue brand in the world. In 2011, I moved from Pfizer to Allergan. And it was a personal and a professional decision. Pfizer was fabulous to start my career, but I'm from the West Coast, and as we started to grow our family, I wanted to be closer to my family here at home. So we moved back here, and that's where I started to work on Botox. And my career here at Allergan has been based in Botox, both on the therapeutic side, where Botox therapeutic has many important indications, both in neurology and urology, and then most recently on the aesthetic side, where I've worked on Allergan Aesthetics since 2015, starting with our breast implant business. We had made an important acquisition with LifeCell that brought us our regenerative medicine business, and then from there, multiple acquisitions and R&D innovations, commercial innovations that helped us to grow the business to what it is now, which is a greater than $5 billion global aesthetic business. So I have a great role here where I'm able to run the business globally, and not only on the commercial side with sales and marketing, but importantly with research and development, with business development, and all of our other functions that help us to think not only now what's important for our customers, but what are the future needs for our customers and our market so we can make the investments now that we need to have new innovations in the future.
Wow, no stone left unturned. You are very busy. Thank you. Dr. Aldona Spiegel from Houston, Texas. Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks so much. And again, thanks for including me. This is a lot of fun, I think, to talk about innovation. And my journey also starts 22 years ago when I first started practice in the Texas Medical Center, where I've been throughout this time at Houston Methodist Hospital. And my focus has always been breast reconstruction. It's my passion. And I feel I've always had a deep desire to improve what we can do for patients. And that's one thing that I really love about plastic surgery is how we can continuously evolve. And many things that we did when I first started practice are things we no longer do, and we do them much better now. And so my road in that has been initially just in improving procedures. I was interested in neurotizing flaps, and midway in my practice, I was really not very happy with our implant-based reconstruction options. And that's when I started to really look at that and try to evolve in that. And I can tell you a little bit more about that pathway, because I think it's really exciting and very interesting, because when I first started practice, I never really thought that this is where my path would lead me to more concentration on innovation and product development and patents and things like that. So I think it's really exciting to be able to go down that road. And I would love for more surgeons to have a little bit more exposure to the possibilities in our specialty for innovation.
Thank you. Dr. Ann Peled from San Francisco.
Thanks again. This is a really incredible group of women to get to be a part of, and I love talking about product development and innovation. I think for me, a lot of the ways my practice have gone have actually been really wonderfully related to amazing mentorship. As a resident, I was a plastic surgery resident at UCSF and did 2 years of a clinical research fellowship that was kind of a combination breast reconstruction and breast oncologic surgery. And I was incredibly grateful that my breast surgery mentor on the oncology side actually suggested to me when I was finishing up my training that I do a breast surgical oncology fellowship. And at the time, and continues to be relatively unique to go that route rather than through general surgery. But honestly, it's probably the best career advice I've ever been given, because ultimately when I finished my plastic surgery residency and then did a breast surgical oncology fellowship, it allowed me to open up a practice where I'm dual trained and able to do both the oncologic and reconstructive part, which I really love and I think has huge benefits for patients. I also think it really allows for innovation when you truly understand both sides of that procedure, the procedures, and the way that we treat patients in that spectrum. So for me, I've been in solo private practice since 2015, but get to co-run a breast cancer program at a big hospital center here in San Francisco called Sutter Health. So I kind of get both parts of being part of a team through the hospital, but also being in solo private practice.
Thank you. So I wanted to dive into where it all began. And Dr. Peled, if you could tell us a little bit more about your innovative techniques that brought you into this product development sphere and that pathway, that story.
So I think like many people, my journey is really related to actually a personal piece of my own story and related to healthcare for myself. And I actually was diagnosed at 37 with stage 1 breast cancer. And it was certainly a shock, like it is for many people. I always joke you can be a vegetarian triathlete, breast cancer surgeon with no family history and still get breast cancer, as we know. But I think it was actually in so many ways incredibly eye-opening for me about how even doing both parts, breast cancer and breast reconstruction, my whole family are breast medical oncologists and breast radiation oncologists. I really felt like I was informed as possible. And I still had a really difficult time making a surgical decision, and particularly around having the double mastectomy that I think most people in my situation at 37, especially as a breast surgeon, would have chosen. And a lot of the reason for that was really thinking about what it would be like at 37 to have the rest of my life impacted in terms of not being able to feel anything in my chest. And I knew one of my friends who'd had a mastectomy a couple of years before, and she said she put on her sports bra and wouldn't even know it was on. Mm-hmm. And I just felt like I wasn't at all ready for that. It just felt too disruptive. It felt like too much. And so I ended up choosing to have a lumpectomy. But literally within weeks of my surgery, my husband, Peled, who is also a board certified plastic surgeon who specializes in peripheral nerve surgery, primarily migraine surgery, we were talking literally over the dinner table about how there are other parts of the body where people are reconstructing nerves. Certainly, as Dr. Spiegel said, there have been people thinking about nerve reconstruction with flaps in the breast for a really long time. And we were kind of talking, why couldn't you try to carefully preserve nerves in the breast, not injure them, not cause numbness, not cause chronic pain, but then also use the new nerve allografts that we have, the cadaver grafts that have started to have more and more data around them in the hand and upper extremity to do reconstruction at the time of implant-based breast reconstruction. So I had, my lumpectomy in late January 2018, and we did our first what we call sensation-preserving mastectomy at the end of February 2018, a month later. And I think kind of haven't really looked back since then. So the two of us operate together regularly, at least 1 or 2 days a week, and we offer all of our patients having any kind of mastectomy, but primarily nipple-sparing mastectomies with immediate implant reconstruction, the opportunity to carefully preserve nerves that can be saved from an oncologic standpoint, and then reconstruct those that can't. And at this point, we've done over 800 of them, and in every round of data are so excited to see that the vast majority of people are able to keep their sensation, they're able to participate in sexuality and intimacy, their nipples respond to touch and temperature, and they really feel in so many cases like they just get to get past their cancer or get past their prophylactic mastectomies and get back into their life. So it's been a really neat journey in terms of interacting with industry around how to continue to evolve this technique using the nerve grafts. How do we teach it? How do we teach teams of surgeons? Because it really takes both the breast and plastic surgeons for this to be successful. So that's kind of been the story of where I've gotten to now, and it interacts with multiple different facets, I think, of what we'll be discussing today.
I love it. It's such a fast paced world and such a personal journey. I appreciate you sharing it because so many people are thinking of it, and that same concept of improving what we were doing 15 years ago to make better outcomes today. So this isn't exactly like a product itself, but more of a technique. How did you think about going around to present it to other people and either copyright it or patent it so that you maintain a connection to it? Was that at all a concern for you?
Yeah, it really was, because I think, for us trying to figure out, like you said, all kind of the work that we've put into researching and studying and what it's like to teach people. We love teaching people, but, having teams of people in your OR like we routinely do, it takes effort and time. So we thought a lot about actually and talked with people around trademarking and patenting. And I think one of the things that we ran into in this setting was the difficulty in believing so strongly in this technique that we really wanted everyone to be able to do, and how there was going to be some monetization of that from a surgeon standpoint. And I really think that felt, very challenging to think about where we're going to be, charging other surgeons for doing this procedure. And so we went through a lot of iterations. And honestly, I think ultimately we talked about, were we going to start a medical education company around it? I mean, I think there are multiple different ways to think about what to do with a new technique. I think ultimately where we've landed that honestly feels good is we have worked with industry in terms of getting the word out. We teach with industry big courses of teams coming and learning together. We host preceptorships through them. So I think ultimately that's been for us, just being realistic with what we have the bandwidth to do, been a really nice place where we still feel like we get to contribute. We get to kind of manage the narrative to some extent and how we think it should be taught. But ultimately it works better for us than going through the whole process around trademarking and or starting an educational company.
I like that. So I wanted to leave that part there because I definitely want to get back to how you maintain the details of your procedure unique to you, but wanted to move along to Dr. Spiegel, Houston plastic surgeon, and also chief of the Division of Innovation at Houston Methodist Hospital. Dr. Spiegel, you also perform neuroionizing flaps and have a unique area is in this breast reconstruction component as well. Could you share a little bit more of that, and also your design of dermal matrices?
Yes, I'd love to. My first entry into practice was really in the era where autologous reconstruction was really where my passion was when I first started, particularly perforator flaps. I was one of the first surgeons in Houston to start doing DEEP flaps, which at the time of the status of tram flaps being kind of the gold standard was definitely a newcomer. So I was very used to doing something that was new, that oftentimes comes with some challenges. Acceptance of a new technique is always difficult. So that was an interesting and challenging time, but I loved how it benefited patients. I do believe that the abdominal wall is much stronger post deep flap surgery. So that kind of allowed me to continue that. And obviously now it's become a gold standard, but it was definitely an evolution. And I realized during the time that while the autologous reconstructions were great, a lot of those patients still didn't have sensation. And during my microsurgery training, I did a lot of brachial plexus surgery for nerve repairs in children and was really used to doing nerve work. And so I realized, particularly a specific patient who ended up having a second degree burn about 2 years after her reconstruction because she really didn't have a lot of sensation in the flap skin. And so that patient inspired me to really start thinking about routinely neurotizing flaps. And that was my first sort of, new procedure that I developed by using a third nerve on the medial aspect of the breast that I really felt could be done routinely by anyone. So at that time, I really wanted to popularize it. I wanted other surgeons to really take that on, and I think it did definitely become a little bit more something that surgeons thought of and talked to patients about. And then later, obviously, Anne and all of her amazing work with implant-based reconstruction has really put sensation on the map as a way for patients to really seek that as a reconstructive goal. So that was really the autologous part of my practice. But as I mentioned, my implant-based reconstructions I felt could be better. I judged my autologous reconstruction as sort of the benchmark, and my implant-based reconstruction really wasn't fitting the mark. And it was around 2005 that we started using ADM in reconstruction, which was great, but the results were still lacking. They weren't as natural. Patients weren't as happy. It was around the same time that nipple-sparing mastectomy was performed more routinely in our hospital. And I realized that a lot of patients that normally could have benefited from a direct-to-implant reconstruction because they really didn't have to have any skin that was missing that needed to be expanded were really having expansion basically due to the ADM. And so I wanted to look at that and figure out how we can design an ADM that essentially is what we need for direct-to-implant reconstruction. So I actually took my patients who were routinely followed post-tissue expander, post-implant with MRIs to follow their implant-based reconstruction. And I actually worked with a computer scientist to basically figure out what a rectangular ADM ended up stretching out to long-term with tissue expanders, and basically designed a shaped ADM to allow for that shape to be more optimal. And so that was my first introduction to MTF, which is a musculoskeletal transplant foundation, which is actually a nonprofit company that was started by surgeons that really is focused on very unique ways of very neat ways of processing ADM, which essentially allows it to be a deeper cut, which is non-polar, meaning that you can put the ADM any which way, and it incorporates very nicely. So I worked with them to develop the specific shape, really mainly for my patients initially. At that time, I really didn't understand anything about IP. I really didn't understand the whole innovation pathway. I was kind of learning as I went along. and ultimately ended up patenting the Flex HD shaped ADM. And that was a revelation. It was something that was really exciting. A lot of people liked it. It ended up being used by many places around the country. And it was my first sort of foray into the world of innovation. When we then started to do prepectoral reconstruction, I now, having learned this before, I did the same thing. I went back and really thought carefully about how to engineer or design an ADM that allows a very natural breast shape. Funny story, I actually used some of my sewing techniques that I learned in high school when I did I actually made my own prom dress, which was quite complicated. It had a corset and fish bones. It was very, very difficult to make. And I remember when I was designing this ADM, it was very similar in trying to make a two-dimensional kind of fabric or ADM shape into a three-dimensional shape that actually contours to an implant. And so that was my second patent that ultimately, again, was popularized and actually used quite widely now, both in the US and abroad in Australia particularly. And that was, again, a big learning process for me, which ultimately started me on many other product developments. I'm currently developing a tissue expander with a drain that has a novel design, fat grafting device, and 3D tissue engineering products. And so that's how the Division of Surgical Innovation actually started at Houston Methodist Hospital. And I'm very excited to bring my knowledge to others and help others in their innovation journey to help patients long-term as well.
Wow. What an incredible journey. I love it. From prom dresses to tissue engineering, 3D reconstruction. What a fun pathway. Did you, just as a follow-up to that, did you go to MTF and ask them to be a part of this journey, or how did you connect with MTF? Or was there another company that you thought that you worked with before them?
No, when I was using ADM, the other products I was using, I wasn't happy with for some quality reasons. And so that's how I initially got introduced to MTF. And I liked their Flex HD pliable product. And one of the things that just coincidentally happened, they had a larger ADM size that was available, which really allowed much more freedom in being able to design a nice amount of ADM that would essentially be able to resemble the arc length that you need without needing a tissue expander. So it was a combination. It just kind of grew organically. Once we had the design and they realized people really liked it, we went through the patenting process. So just to kind of for everyone, obviously, once you have something that's unique, you should protect it. So intellectual property protection is very important. One key difference that many people don't realize is you should actually not really disclose it to anyone before you protect it. So oftentimes I'll get asked by people to, show things in a presentation. And it's really important for people to know that if they have something unique that they want to protect, they actually shouldn't be presenting on it, which is an important fact to remember. And so once you have this patent, you go through the patent process. And, depending on the timeline, it can get granted within 1 year, 3 years, or maybe longer. This patent was granted actually very quickly, which was really great.
Wow, Carrie, I don't want to leave you out of this conversation, and I'm drawing you in this. So we've talked about components of a unique procedure, as well as Dr. Spiegel, who has unique products. From an industry perspective of this, when you have people come to you with pitches or proposals of new devices or products, what typically catches your eye, or what will persuade you that this is something that might drive the market?
We look at opportunities that are filling an unmet need that doesn't exist right now. So is there a category of patient need of which there's no adequate solution right now? That would be an incremental opportunity. We also look at technologies that can make existing solutions better, safer, more effective. So we think about it in those two ways. So kind of an area we're already in that could be better, or an area that we're not in where we could fill a need. And then from there, I mean, there's all sorts of ways of looking at the technologies at all different phases of the life cycle. So we look at things that are very early. We look at technologies that are already on the market. And depending on the phase, the life cycle that the technology's in, there's different questions, there's different requirements, there's different valuation methodologies. But, at Allergan Aesthetics, we're really open to anything that would be, solving a problem or making a current solution better. And we actually, it's very timely, just in a couple of weeks, we are going to be hosting the AbbVie Allergan Aesthetics Golden Passport process. And what that is an example of how we try to support early stage innovation. And this is a partnership with university lab partners at the University of California, Irvine, and small startups and inventors and small companies pitch, and they pitch for the Golden Passport. And what the Golden Passport is from Allergan is access to a wet lab bench for 1 year and access to business and scientific mentorships. And so this is just an example of what we do to try to enrich and encourage technology at all stages. We see ourselves as in this business in the aesthetics category, in the surgical category, for the very, very long term. And so we want to make sure we're doing everything we can to plant seeds and encourage innovation early stage. But then late stage products are interesting too. So we're interested, we're interested in any good idea. When you ask kind of what makes it appealing, of course, there's all different types of presentations that come our way. There's a lot of incomings. I would say our team is very busy assessing all sorts of incoming opportunities that people call Allergan about. But we also have a external search and evaluation strategy where we go to conferences and we go to trade shows and we look and assess the landscape, and we make outgoing questions to different companies to try to learn about the technology. And frankly, it's hard to say yes. It's hard to say no. There's so many great options out there that the key is that we're asking the right questions and that we are making sure that Allergan or AbbVie is the right owner for this technology to be able to maximize it for the best interest of our customers and our consumers.
When you see some of these new products come to you, is one of the criteria that it would require FDA approval? Or would Allergan take on products that would not be FDA approved?
That's a great question, and that's a question about timing. So ultimately, every product that we would commercialize would have an FDA approval or clearance. The question is when you acquire it. And so there are many examples of companies or technologies that we've acquired that have already been on the market. I mentioned LifeCell. That was a very big acquisition of products, of course, and EDMs that were already on the market. We also look at technologies for products that are not yet on the market. Right now, we have a venture investment in a very early stage hair restoration product. And so that's a venture investment that would require a lot of support and help along the way to go through the clinical data generation and regulatory process to eventually seek FDA approval or clearance. So it depends. And of course, the valuation goes along with the phase of development and risk. So something that's very early stage, it still comes with a lot of risk and question mark and work to get it approved, versus a product that's already in the market, already FDA approved, already has a base of customers and revenue. The valuation would reflect that as well.
Okay. I mean, just one more follow-up question to that. So if we were to think of the many ideas that are proposed to you as this large funnel, how many of those ideas that go through that funnel, what are the different decision points that would lead you to eventually invest in the maybe one or two products that will eventually find its way outside of that funnel? So looking at those venture economics and out of the many products that are pitched to you, how many do you think you would actually invest in?
Well, I can tell you about some of the deals that we have done recently. And so in terms of categories where we want to fill an unmet need, cellulite. We recently, in the past few years, acquired a company called Soliton that has a rapid acoustic pulse technology for cellulite. That's a product that was, interestingly, it had a 510K approval for cellulite. It had a very, very small install base. It was at an early stage of its commercial expansion. And that's something that we saw as that kind of first bucket, which is there's no adequate technology for cellulite, and so we pursued that. Another would be a biohybrid calcium hydroxyapatite HA injectable. That was a company in Israel that we acquired a couple of years ago with a product that was on the market in Brazil. And so what we did then is, yes, it was valued based on the sales we had in Brazil, and then of course there's the potential to do the work, which is clinical development, data generation, and regulatory approval to get it approved in other parts of the world. And so those are two examples of deals that we assessed and that we did pursue. In terms of the questions we asked, we have a team that's a team of 3 different types of experts. We have commercial strategy, we have scientific search and evaluation, and then we have business development. And what that triad does is they make sure it's a strategic fit with us. They make sure that it's scientifically sound. And then they make sure then there's a transactional element on the BD side. That group brings all those ideas to me and another group of executives, and we evaluate them, and we evaluate them regularly. And I can tell you there's a very high velocity of really cool technologies that are always coming to us for our assessment. Is the product scientifically sound? Is there a data package to support it? Is there IP? I think your discussion around IP is an important one because we don't want Me Too's or copycats. We want things that are highly differentiated, and often IP needs to be wrapped around that to help protect that differentiated asset. We look at, to your point, the path to a regulatory approval. We look at, are we the best owner to have it? Is it a strategic fit with the areas that we're already in? Is there a global opportunity? Is this just a U.S. product? Is this something we can bring into other parts of the world? What are the claims we can make? Again, with your questions around the FDA approval, surgeons may use it for something, but will we be able to get the claims that our team can promote it and train to those uses? These are all the types of questions that we ask before we pursue in following through with any of these technologies.
So much of this in these discussions we've talked about involves research. And Dr. Ann Peled from San Francisco, in your sensation-preserving mastectomy, there must have been a fair amount of research that was needed before you actually performed this procedure on your first patient. Where did you find that research funding? How did that come about?
So there fortunately was pretty good data already using the nerve allografts in other parts of the body. And so for us, we were able to get support from the company itself in terms of funding around grafts, because the major issue that we ran into was insurance coverage, since this really was basically performing at that time a procedure that had not a lot of insurance coverage, had very little data for sure. And so I think that was really helpful for being able to offer it to patients without having concerns around, not having our own data and asking people, for instance, to pay out of pocket. So it was really helpful to have industry support at that time. And then as we've evolved, certainly it's been helpful to be able to be thinking about grant funding and getting, pre-medical interns and other people involved as we've supported a larger database.
And then because this is more of a technique, how do you protect the intellectual property of your specific technique? And who do you see as your biggest competitor?
So again, I think as you were mentioning, I think this is because it's a technique and because in all honesty, there's not a specific product that we would develop for the technique to some extent. Certainly we've talked about, I think there are different pieces of the technique that I think there'll be interesting technology that we're working on in the background around how to optimize this procedure. So I think for us, what we've really been planning on is trying to think to go in that direction in terms of now that the technique is out there and sort of like Dr. Spiegel said, once you start talking about it and teaching it, it can be to some degree a difficult time to then go back after the fact. And we feel comfortable with that. I think, again, it's more about how to optimize it from that perspective. So that's kind of how we have decided. I will say with the technique, though, and similarly to products and other things, I'm sure Carrie deals with this on a broader scale as well. It is a little difficult to think about developing something and then worrying about how it's going to be implemented. And I know I certainly worry a lot about this technique being taken on by people who aren't fully trained and thinking about, people saying, well, it doesn't work. And certainly if you're not doing it correctly, it probably won't. So I think the way that we've figured out how to address that is really trying to do everything we can to educate around it. My husband and I both go to various meetings, both on the plastic surgery side and on the breast surgery side, really try to get on, platforms across the globe to really try to make sure that we're optimizing, have lots of technique videos in those talks, just because we really want to make sure that ideally people do understand the team approach piece of it and they are performing it in a fashion where it's going to be successful.
When you knew that this was going to be a procedure that would work and have the outcomes that you were looking for, what did you do next? Did you think I have to speak about this at a variety of meetings? Did you think maybe I have to write the textbook on this? What was your pattern to market this to plastic surgeons around the country, around the world, the importance of this?
So we've really decided to have kind of a multi-pronged approach. And I think to some extent, as a breast cancer survivor, I'm very involved in that breast cancer survivor community as well. I sit on the board at some large patient-facing institutions and organizations. And I think for us, we really, wanted to educate patients about it and have certainly been very vocal in that space, because I do think that when we're trying to change the standard of care, essentially. I think many of us feel that sensation is really the next frontier. And oftentimes patients push things forward better than physicians do because they're able to put pressure on people to change and do something different. Because we all know that starting a new technique and really making major changes to your practice isn't something that most of us do very easily. So patient education has been a huge part of the strategy. I think the next part is really sharing to physicians patient stories around sensation and why it matters. I'm going to be honest, I did feel like I was really thinking through the issues, but similar to Dr. Spiegel's story, it wasn't until I was in that place myself that I think I really understood how much the sensory piece of it matters. And I'm grateful every day that, I now get to offer a procedure that I didn't have the option of. People always say, well, would you go back and do it differently? And I wouldn't. I would never have had a mastectomy at the time I was diagnosed, because I wouldn't have wanted to live the way that would have ended up being. So I think sharing stories around patients, making sure that surgeons know that it is important is so key, because we still get pushback on that. And then I think the final piece of it is anytime you're innovating in a space involving cancer, certainly that can be challenging in terms of the oncologic safety. So I personally spend a lot of time educating oncologic surgeons about why this technique isn't more risky, why we're not leaving more breast tissue behind, and sort of really making sure that people feel like we're continuing to prioritize cancer surgery, prophylactic mastectomies first and foremost, but that preserving sensation is also possible while still having good oncologic outcomes.
And it sounds that you are training people. People can come to your operating room and learn these techniques. Is it more for the plastic surgeon, or is it also for the breast surgeon to have this a component of their mastectomy?
So we feel really strongly that it has to be both. And in fact, it won't have people come unless they're part of teams. So for us, I really feel that the standard way that many of us were trained, where the breast/general surgeon comes in, does a mastectomy, walks out of the room, and then the plastic surgeon comes in and does a reconstruction. That's just not going to work in this setting, because if all of your nerves have been cut through, you're never going to have the kind of results that you can have when you can actually assess the nerves, preserve as much length as you can. So we personally feel really strongly that this has to be a team approach for training.
I like it. Dr. Aldona Spiegel from Houston, Texas, You are the director or chief of Division of Innovation at Houston Methodist Hospital, and a variety of different new innovations, products, tissue expanders, fat grafting. As a physician innovator, do you prefer to partner with an industry and be taken on as an advisory panel, or is there a different pathway that you prefer when you're looking at launching new projects?
Yes, this is a very important question, because I think that, in this space, plastic surgeons are maybe not aware of all the opportunities that they have. And I sort of divide it into both internal and external innovation. So internal innovation is products or procedures that I feel I would like to have as a surgeon. All of the things that I've developed are things that I wanted to have. I would love to have a better tissue expander with a drain. There are some things on the market, but I don't think they're optimal. And so I went and designed one that I want to use for my patients as well. Obviously, the FDA regulatory component is very important, and it is, as Dr. Peled said, more difficult around the breast, because there are implants involved. It's breast cancer, so it's very sensitive area for the FDA. So the regulatory pathway for anything in the breast is tricky and probably more difficult than anywhere else in the body. So I think it's important to realize that. And once you have a concept that you want to develop, I think it's important to protect it. So that's kind of step number one. But once you do that, then you can decide what best approach is it to partner with an industry partner, a strategic, whether to license or develop the product together. As Carrie so eloquently described all of the options that are available, whether it's early or late. It really depends on how much effort you want to put into it. Now, as a full-time plastic surgeon, it's very difficult to, take some of your clinical time away and do innovation. I think in order to do it successfully, you have to be committed to it. So whether you decide just to license your sort of IP, or if you want to develop it further, really has a lot of impact on your practice. So those are really important things to think about. And then external innovation, I think, is also really important. As you mentioned, consulting, which is something that I know a lot of surgeons do. I personally feel that surgeons are better used and utilized when companies go to them earlier. What I've seen, particularly being a judge at medtech competitions with a lot of pitches, I find that there's a lot of very excited engineers or people that have started companies based on some assumptions that maybe clinically are not actually as relevant. And I would love to be able to have surgeons be able to be involved with those companies earlier. Oftentimes, these companies come to us once the product is already developed, and I would love to develop a workflow where that happens earlier. So a part of what I'd like to do in our new division of surgical innovation is to actually create those two pathways, both internal innovation and then help with external innovation, where other companies are coming in and we're able to help them develop their products better and faster.
Do you see them as the physician innovator to be part of the like an advisory board once an industry takes them on, or do you see many times where they're part of a parent company? What would you think would be the traditional model that the innovator has relationship with the industry, as just an advisory board, or do they stay on as just the clinical champion, or do they become having a long-term stake in the company?
Yeah, that's a great question. It really evolves around IP. If you are a consultant, most of the time, as a part of your contract, any IP that is generally developed when those types of relationships is really owned by the company. And so I think it's important for plastic surgeons to know that if they do have a specific idea that is different and distinct from the product that they're advising on, that they may want to think about that as a different type of relationship with a strategic company, and basically develop an IP product that has joint IP, perhaps. But a lot of our new ideas, I think, are given away too easily during those consulting agreements. Particularly for me, I know that I've had lots of ideas that I shared very quickly with industry, and they were incorporated into their product. But I think that going back, I would have done it differently, and I would have probably partnered with them in a different way, not just as a consultant, but actually and as an advisory a board member, or creating shared or joint IP.
Did you have a mentor in this process or a lawyer? I mean, who helped you navigate in these early years what to share and what not to share? Because it sounds like that's such a pivotal time in early development that either you could make it or break it for yourself.
Yes, that is very true. As a part of the institution that I'm in, we do have a very robust office of technology transfer as well as IP legal help. So that was definitely instrumental. However, a lot of the decisions and really understanding the landscape of when to share things and when not to was something that I really learned by trial and error. So being as a part of an institution is very helpful. I would imagine as a private practice physician, it is a little bit more difficult and more expensive and risky because all of that output of funds that you have to do for patents is quite pricey. But of course, as an employee in an institution, once you are an inventor, you do share the revenue with your institution. And obviously, that's a different set of circumstances. So as an inventor, you have to decide whether you want to sort of do it on your own and take all of that risk, or whether you'd rather do it in an institution where you share that risk and the revenue.
And when you share that revenue, is it for the lifetime of the product, or is there a certain time duration? Is that something that you map out early?
Most institutions have a very specific agreement as part of an employment agreement, or they should if they think about innovation. Most of the larger institutions do, and the terms are different. Some institutions are very, very favorable for the inventor, and some are not. So I think if someone is interested in that, that would be a really important part of their contract to look at, to make sure that those terms are realistic and favorable for them.
It's impressive how you have navigated this. It sounds like so much by yourself, and as a trial and error component, it's quite the journey. Carrie, Vice President of AbbVie and President of Global Aesthetics for Allergan. We talked a little bit about earlier some of the different phases of investment. First phase being research funding, and you have a stake in this with this newer development project where you're encouraging physician innovators to come to you. Where would Allergan work with inventors regarding seed money for further development? Or would you, in order to really invest in them, is there a component where they have to have a certain amount of sales before they would become a legitimate investor? It sounds like there's probably an early phase and a later phase, but what would be your preference or traditional model?
Well, like Dr. Spiegel was saying, there's all different types of structures depending on the two parties. And so, we have, in terms of non-acquisition, like on one end of the spectrum, there's a full buyout or acquisition of the company and or product. On the other end of the spectrum, there's investment. I mentioned our investment in just making sure there is a strong aesthetics innovation environment through the AbbVie Golden Passport. We also have AbbVie Ventures. AbbVie Ventures is where we will take a stake in companies that are strategic, but in areas that we don't have expertise. And I mentioned the hair growth, kind of hair restoration category, where we're highly interested in it from a strategy standpoint, but this small company has much better expertise there than we do at this point. And so That's how we're trying to spur innovation early stage. As the companies progress, there's all sorts of different types of structures. There could be a royalty. There could be a license. I think it was Dr. Spiegel and Dr. Peled talking about IP and licensing the IP. The timelines for those are dependent on what's negotiated in the deal. Then the role that the inventor plays will depend on their personal interest and what the acquirer needs. There's times where the inventor stays on to help lead the product through the integration into the company and its success. There's other times where the inventor is happy, selling or working out the deal and then moving on to do something else. So the long answer is it depends. There's all sorts of different structures. When we look at these opportunities, we try to do it in a way where it really is a win-win and fair for everyone, in a way where you're truly able to maximize the opportunity. And so if it's an earlier stage asset where we believe in the technology and the data, but that company or that inventor needs Allergan to help it to go through the regulatory process, then that's a great fit, right? Because that's where we can come in and help to get it over the finish line with our expertise and strength there. So the nice thing is we can be creative and innovative and do what makes most sense for all parties involved.
Yeah, I mean, you can really see that the partnership with industry can really streamline the pathway for the physician innovator and pick up where maybe they were struggling or didn't have the assets or the bandwidth to cross over the finish line. Right. That partnership seems to could be so beneficial for both parties.
And I would really say it is a partnership, and so many of our best ideas have come from surgeons and doctors and our customers that are telling us this is what the market needs. And you're hearing that right now from Dr. Spiegel and Dr. Peled, and I think it is so true.
Yeah. So we're kind of closing out our time today, and I just wanted to finish with a question from Dr. Peled from San Francisco, California, and Dr. Aldona Spiegel from Houston, Texas. If you woke up tomorrow morning with a new idea, what would be your pathway to production, knowing what you know now from what you did 15 years ago? Let's start with Dr. Spiegel.
That's a great question. I have a lot of ideas, so this is a very common occurrence for me. I'm a visual person, so I usually draw it, and I would kind of spend some time and really think about it and thoughtfully put together a disclosure, which is in our institution the way ideas are formulated and submitted to our Office of Technology Transfer. And then what happens with that is that they look at it, they look at prior art to see if this is an idea that's able to be protected, whether it's patentable. And if so, then we go ahead and submit for a patent application. So that's kind of a quick overview of the process in a nutshell.
I love it. And then Dr. Ann Peled, inventor of sensation-preserving mastectomy, waking up in the morning, knowing what you know now, how could you streamline a new technique or product than you did 15 years ago?
I think as in many things, I think a lot of times we get so excited about new things, especially when we start seeing early data that things are working well. And so I think for me, kind of doing it all over again, one, starting out, trying to thinking about randomized control data off the bat. Again, I think a lot of times we get so excited for something new and we just want to get going, which is what we did. And I think being able to go back and have that support in a controlled fashion is incredibly helpful. And then I think the second thing would really be knowing now kind of what that process would be looking like, to thinking about trademarking, getting more information from someone who really understands how patents would work in this setting, and then trying to kind of curb some of that enthusiasm while continuing to develop the technique. In my mind, I think would be something to go back and do if I could.
Yeah, that trademarking. I love it. Carrie Strom, Vice President of AbbVie. What do you hope to promote or be a part of in production in the next 5 years?
Oh, gosh. Well, there's so much that we have in our pipeline that we're excited about, but what we're looking to do is complement our pipeline externally where our gaps are. The areas that we're interested in, I mentioned hair. We think that Hair growth is a great category of unmet need that could serve many men and women. We are interested in cellulite, which we have an asset we're excited about launching, but of course it's multimodal. We're interested in skin tightening in the face and the body. And then we're interested in anything in the breast reconstruction space that you all have done to teach us that we should never, good enough is not enough. We need to make sure that women undergoing breast reconstruction feel like the absolute best version of themselves through the best products and surgical technique. And you all have been continuing to raise the bar there, and we want to help you with that. So those are the areas that we're excited about.
It's very exciting. All right. Well, thank you, Carrie Strom, president of Global Allergan Aesthetics, Dr. Ann Peled, inventor of sensation-preserving mastectomy, and Dr. Aldona Spiegel, also inventor of Flex HD Shaped, as well as a variety of fabulous new products that I know we'll be looking for, and Chief of Innovation at Houston Methodist Hospital, for sharing your expertise on product development and industry partnerships with our listeners. It's been an enlightening and fascinating, fast-paced 45 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Limitless Leaders podcast series, brought to you by ASPS, the Aesthetic Society, and the American Hernia Society, with the generous support of Allergan Aesthetics. We hope you enjoyed our conversation today and gained valuable insights and inspiration from our guests. Please check out other episodes of your favorite podcast platform. You can download them directly from ASPS EdNet. Stay tuned for new seasons, exciting new episodes where we will continue to celebrate and empower women leaders in plastic surgery and in general surgery. Thank you.